This is a very brief story about a campaign, a political campaign. In a time of mean-spirited and vicious politics, this campaign crossed the line. It was and still is dishonest, with numerous outrageous distortions and false accusations. But hey, it's a free country. People can say what they want. But this attack was paid for by taxpayers. Yes, you and I paid to distort the facts and to push elected officials to pass laws. How much? Reports show about $650,000, and that is against the law. This is the story of the Upstream attack on Washington state farmers. What we know so far is from documents requested by Save Family Farming under the Freedom of Information Act. We don't have all the documents as the EPA is slow in providing them, but from what we can tell so far, these documents tell a dark and troubling story. It all began in late 2010 when the EPA granted the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission millions of dollars for habitat restoration. This commission is a consortium of Pacific Northwest Native American tribes. The Indian Commission then awarded money to individual tribes for their own projects. The environmental manager for one of those tribes, Larry Wasserman, is not a Native American but has a long history of antagonism toward farmers. He was approved to use those grant funds for what he called a public education project. But the stated goal was not to educate, but to secure new legislative measures to protect water. Remarkably, this was approved by the EPA. The EPA has exceptionally friendly relations with the tribes. But from the beginning, Region 10 staff expressed concern about the public perception of lobbying while approving the project as legal. This was the very first serious mistake made by the EPA, but not the last. A website was launched sometime in 2013 or 2014, and at first it was somewhat reasonable. But with a cow in the logo and cows prominently shown, it was clear that the focus of the so-called education campaign was to build anger against farmers and their supposed pollution. The project manager hired the Seattle politically oriented communication firm Strategies 360, who conducted public opinion polls with voters and began developing a campaign clearly focused on building voter outrage against farmers and passing new regulations that would take substantial farmland out of production. The hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars started flowing into this firm's coffers. The real problem starts in early 2015 when EPA's Lisa Chang gets wind of a major redo of the campaign. At this point in the story, we must tell you a bit about Marty Lesh. Mr. Lesh was an attorney for the Swinomish tribe, the same one that Mr. Wasserman, the project manager, worked for. He also lives on the reservation near Anacortes in Skagit County. He became Governor Christine Gregoire's chief of staff until Governor Inslee took office in 2013. He was in private practice for a year, then joined Strategies 360 as their general counsel or primary lawyer and their chief operation officer. With Lesh in the driver's seat, Wasserman had his old friend preparing the attack with taxpayer money. EPA staff asked to review the materials, and when they did, they saw some real problems with the content. They didn't like that this so-called public education campaign was filled with false claims, old science, and focused exclusively on farmers. They questioned the activities of the campaign and the contradictions between what the campaign was saying and the Puget Sound Action Agenda, the official environmental plan. They asked the work on the campaign be stopped until they could do a thorough review. The delay did not sit well with Mr. Wasserman. He pressed them on the legal and contractual basis for the delay. In other words, while spending hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars, Mr. Wasserman believed he had the right to do what he wanted and say what he wanted without interference from the government officials responsible for how that money was spent. Mr. Wasserman went right to the top, to Dennis McLaren, the Region 10 administrator. This region covers Oregon, Idaho, Washington, and Alaska. Mr. McLaren is widely considered to be exceptionally antagonistic to farmers, and it appears that antagonism led him to make the next big mistake. The documents suggest he gave Mr. Wasserman and Mr. Lesh the green light to proceed as they wanted without interference from EPA staff. We have no document that says that specifically. But what we do have are documents that show continuing concern from EPA staff about the obvious false statements being made, the distortions, the inappropriate focus on agriculture, and the use of outdated science. What we also have is the project managers, Wasserman and Lesh, largely ignoring these comments and proceeding without any further delays. The What's Upstream campaign was launched in October 2015 with a new website. The website started right off with videos showing farmers, dirty water and grotesque dead salmon, clearly spawned out salmon. It included online advertising on news websites, radio advertising on a Seattle public radio station, then in March of 2016, bus advertising in Whatcom County and billboards in Bellingham and Olympia. The billboards carried the primary false accusation: unregulated agriculture is putting our waterways at risk. Farming is highly regulated, and farmers are working hard to protect our water with increasing success. The advertising carried a photo of dairy cows standing in a stream. That is completely illegal in Washington state. Where did these photos come from? Turns out they were bought online and were from Pennsylvania, Amish cows, and from England. Farmers became very angry. Press reports across the country, starting with Capital Press, carried the outrageous story of taxpayer funding a completely false campaign against farmers, with full support of the EPA. U.S. senators and representatives went to work until over one-third of Congress complained bitterly to EPA Director McCarthy about this campaign. She said EPA was distressed about it. Then the finger-pointing began. The tribal chairman wrote to Congress saying EPA was intimately involved. In response to the pressure, Administrator McLaren said the EPA's involvement was limited to, quote, technical input, unquote, and a legal review. The facts show otherwise. He also said the campaign was halted. But as of August 2016, the website and social media carrying the false accusations against farmers built with taxpayer money go on. What will happen next? The Office of Inspector General is investigating. The Government Accounting Office found the EPA guilty of violating federal law against lobbying in another case in late 2015. But whether or not government officials responsible for spending public money to support political activity they favor are held accountable will be largely up to our elected representatives. Save Family Farming is appealing to Representatives Rick Larson and Susan DelBene and Senators Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell to hold these government officials accountable. Federal and state laws have likely been broken. Save Family Farming is working to ensure that those responsible are held accountable. More than the future of farming is at stake. Spending public money to support candidates or legislation is corruption, and it is illegal. If government officials are behind this, they must be held accountable regardless of the issue involved. Save Family Farming is working to make sure that happens.